Okay. All right, good. Thanks for being here with us, Jim, on the Small Market Podcast. Um, as you
The small
know,
market podcast, the small market podcast, given what we're going through, is as big a market as you're going to get out there. So
yeah,
don't worry about it.
that's kind of what I was gonna say. We had a whole list of questions ready for you, and with everything being so fluid and stuff, with the situation, and basically they're probably canceling the season as we speak. A lot of those questions have pretty much just been shot. So we'll kind of try and make the best of it as we can.
We'll do all right. We'll be fine. And like you said, this is the beauty of breaking news. It happens while you're doing it. And really, that's the fun part of doing what we do, is the fact that we are on the air when this whole thing is breaking. And we can speculate and talk all we want. And it appears as though, as we speak, even though the Big Ten presidents have said we have not taken a vote yet, most everybody is indicating that they're going to vote 12-2 about postponing or causing a cancellation of fall sports and moving football, collegiate football anyway, at the Big Ten institutions to the fall, or excuse me, to the spring. So, I mean, that's something we had all talked about, maybe a possibility during this pandemic, and we're seeing the reality of it now, and all of us have to adjust and adapt and move forward.
Yeah. Jim Harbaugh, he released a statement earlier today saying that he was for it, and there's some players kind of putting together kind of like a movement, hashtag movement and stuff. Do you think that's going to have any sway on the rest of the Power Five to continue to play? Or is this is pretty much just a given that it's going to be a domino effect? I would guess, right?
I would think so, and I agree. Jim did the right thing. I mean, he came up with all the reasons, and he talked about how his team has done absolutely everything necessary in order to remain safe, in order to keep his student athletes at Michigan clear of the virus, and it apparently has worked really well, including the staff. And he sees there's no reason why to stop the season. But in many ways, it's out of his hands. It's in the medical professionals' hands. It's in the university administration's hands.
Yep.
And that goes from the president, not just the athletic administration, but the president of the university, and add the medical professionals that are involved in the government and their guidelines, along with your state and local governments in each state. And every state has a different set of rules. So it's really difficult to jump through all those hoops for all of those states and all those administrations and all those guidelines for one team to say we've done a good job, where everybody else has a different set of rules. So I admire Jim and applaud him for absolutely making his case why they could play. But as sadly as it is, it's not Jim's decision anymore. It maybe should be, but you know what? That's not the world we live in anymore.
Yeah, the cards are definitely stacked against him, as you pretty much put it. So. What do you think about the players' unity group? I mean, that's pretty much, now that they're canceling the season, does that kind of just make them irrelevant then? Because their big issues were health and safety for this, but if they're not going to play till the spring or till this kind of passes over, go ahead.
Yeah, the idea of health and safety, if that was their main concern, I would suggest canceling the season is a home run in regards to health and safety.
Right.
Because you're doing, I mean, the administration, the conference commissioners, the conference presidents are doing all they can to mitigate the COVID-19 virus by canceling everything and keeping everybody as safe as possible. So from that standpoint, the players, what do you want to call it, a union or unified front, and their demands for safety clearly have been met by canceling the season, because now there's no real interaction and testing can continue, and you work your way through school in the classroom up to the end of the year where maybe a vaccine is allowed, and then you move forward from that, and then they, who knows, may play a season in the spring. We'll have to wait and see what their decision is on that. But from that standpoint, I think the players group can still have an impact and have a say in some of the things that are going on out there. But from the pure safety standpoint in regards to COVID, I think the conference presidents and commissioner and athletic directors have answered that question fully in their favor, and that they're as safe as they possibly can be by not being out there playing anywhere, even though that may not be their optimum way to go about this fall.
Mr. Brandstatter, I think that's a fantastic answer, and that's something Andy and I didn't even think of. But I kind of had a theory that we discussed beforehand, was that possibly the NCAA might have had a hand in, maybe they thought it'd be in their best interest to cancel the season to kind of dissolve any talks of a players' unity group. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't necessarily think that they did that. I mean, there's so many factors involved. I mean, let's face it, the economic factor in regards to the money generated by college football is catastrophic, the effect that it's going to have on universities. Now, the Power 5 conferences can probably survive. They'll be hurting for quite a few years to get back to the level that they were in 2019, 2018. But they'll probably survive. It's the schools like Mid-American Conference schools. Mm-hmm. Their economic model is just torn to shreds.
Well,
and there are young, non-revenue producing sports, swimming, diving, men's track and field, women's track and field, volleyball, field hockey. Those sports may be eliminated from a lot of the smaller schools and maybe some of the larger schools because there just simply isn't enough revenue to support them. Absolutely. So all that stuff is part of the consideration of the NCAA. I think the NCAA didn't necessarily, going back to your question, didn't necessarily kind of, cancel the season to kind of get a quote-unquote union or players' unity front and stop that whole movement. I don't think they did that. I think they did it for strictly on a situation where if you start a season, let's play what if. If you start a season in September 5th, and like baseball, where Miami and St. Louis, both of them can't play. They've got, COVID viruses going on. Imagine if you started a season in September 5th and in September 27th, in your third or fourth game, you said, hey, we got to cancel. Because you couldn't control the COVID throughout the entire conference. Imagine the egg on your face when that would have happened.
Right.
So the most prudent decision in a standpoint of, okay, let's look at public relations. Now, let's look at the safety of our student athletes. Probably that's number one. Public relations second. If we had to announce after 3 or 4 weeks of the season, okay, we're done, we've got to cancel, you'd have looked really stupid.
Sure.
And I think by canceling now and saying, let's take a back seat here, see what we can do when we come back in the spring, maybe start in late March and play 6-7 games and finish up in early May and then start 2021 as a normal year. I mean, I just think the NCAA is looking for all kinds of options, and the option of starting and then with the specter hanging over your head of maybe having to stop a season, I think just scared them to death.
Sure.
And it would have looked bad, I think.
Well, I agree with you. And, Andy and I kind of debated the last couple days. He thought, man, I think it was just wishful thinking on his part. There's no way they can cancel college football. And my thought was, well, it's a lot easier for like the major leagues, for Major League Baseball and NBA to play in a bubble or play in isolated situations, and they're worth, billions of dollars. They can afford to do this, but what we forget is that college athletes and college sports, they're in school first and foremost, and athletes kind of second. There's maybe a handful of athletes on those teams that are playing because they're going to have a professional career in pro sports. What's your take on that? What do you think? I mean, what's the contrast between pro sports and college sports?
Well, I agree with that. I mean, even with the television money that comes, into the collegiate level at the football level, you remember that there are Division I teams. There's 105, 106 of them, and they divide the conferences. The Pac-12 gets this, Big Ten gets that, with the Big Ten Network and ESPN, A, B, C, and everybody splits that pot. All 5 power conferences, plus the Mid-America conferences on Thursday nights, they get a piece of the ESPN pie. And all that's well and good, but all of the big money, all the money in the NFL is split between 32 teams.
Right.
That means you get a whole lot bigger piece of that pie. So that money can go and help you control and manage the virus and all the testing and all those things that you have to do. That's why the NBA went to a bubble. Right. And so you're right. I did not think a college football season could be canceled either. I just said that they can't do it. But in March, when they played the first round of the Players' Championship down at TPC Jacksonville, and literally 20 minutes after the first round finished, they said, "We're done. Go home. It's over." I thought, whoa, yeah, this is serious. Yeah. And from that point, the dominoes in golf started to fall. I mean, no Masters, no the British Opens. It's done. It's gone. I mean, for 2020, it's been eliminated. Oldest golf championship on the planet, and so this is a whole different universe we live in. So I agree with you that I didn't think they could stop college football, but given what we're witnessing, and again, a lot of it goes on politically. I mean, there's all this political back and forth about the virus and who's in charge, whether the government did this and the government did that, and we get into that argument all night long. But ultimately, if the colleges and universities and the NCAA opt in favor of the student-athlete safety, they're safe. Right. And they can't, I don't think, be criticized.
There's no liability. Now, you were saying a bigger piece of the pie. The Pac-12, their unity group, one of their demands was 50% revenue sharing. You, as a former player back then, and it still is today, you get a free education, you're on scholarship. That's kind of your payment, I guess, for playing for that school. What are your thoughts on that demand of a 50% revenue sharing?
Personally, I think it's short-sighted by the athletes. I mean, the athletic business model is real simple. Football generates 45 to 50% of the income of most athletic departments, maybe a bit more. And if you decide, okay, we're going to take 50% of that, we're going to give it away to the student athletes on football. Okay, that's one problem, because now all of a sudden the funding of the athletic department completely takes a hit. So does wrestling get eliminated? Does track and field get eliminated? Because that budget all of a sudden is taking a hit, and you're paying players, or they're taking 50% of that revenue that they generate. Okay, and so there are a lot of guys that are competing in quote-unquote non-revenue producing sports at UCLA or USC, like track and field, like water polo, other than basketball, field hockey, the whole things. Those scholarships and those sports may just dry up and go away and become club sports. Is that what we want? There are no grant and aid scholarships for those athletes to come and get an education at USC or UCLA. So the football players are basically saying to the rest of the athletes, by taking that money, we're going to just take a gigantic hole out of this budget. You administrators figure out what you're going to do. But ultimately, it's going to come down, the reality of life, it's going to come down to them cutting sports. Next issue that I just think is short-sighted. So you're going to pay 50% goes to the athletes playing football, right? Or basketball, whatever.
Right.
Okay. Does the quarterback get $25,000? What does this long snapper get?
Right. Yeah.
Does he get the same amount, or is he significantly less?
Yeah, you're gonna split it. If you split the 50% up evenly between all the guys on the roster, the quarterback's gonna say, "Hey, what are you doing?
Exactly.
I'm the quarterback. Hey, man, I got the punter here. Plays 6 snaps a game. He's not gonna save as me." Right. You start going down that road, and I'm telling you what, you're gonna have tons of problems. That's why I think it's short-sighted. Here's the last thing I will say. Okay, if you guys get paid, then you pay your own tuition and books and room and board.
Right. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
How do you like that?
Yeah.
How do you like that? You want to do that?
Right.
You do that, and then maybe you can save some sports. So out of that money, 75% of what you make comes out back to the university as part of your tuition, books, whatever your grant and aid scholarship is for. Let's throw that one out and see whether they go for that one.
Kind of opening up a Pandora's box there.
Sure.
Different
like I said, you go down that road.
Right.
I mean, both of you can imagine if you go down that road, you are going to. There are landmines at every step if you go down that road, and I don't think it's wise, and I don't think it's in the best interest of all collegiate student athletes. Not just talking about football, basketball, and the revenue guys. Talking about all of them. The guys that work their butts off, in gymnastics and in hockey, for to be quite frank, swimming and diving, rowing, crew. Oh, there are 900 at the University of Michigan. I think 900 scholarship athletes. 450 of them maybe don't get that edge in school if you start paying the football players and basketball players 50% of the revenues.
Right.
That's not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Well, I've maintained for years, Brandy, and I think I'm on an island that, you're the scholarship or full ride scholarship, that's your payment, that's your reimbursement.
I'm on that island with you.
Yeah. What was it like when you were in school? I don't know, did you have a scholarship or?
I did. I had a full ride grant and aid scholarship. And you're right. I always say, well, I want to get paid. Well, you ask the parent of one of these athletes that's going to school.
Right.
If you didn't have to come up with a check every September.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you feel like your son is, ooh, God, he's helping me out a lot. That's a big load off of my back. If you told a parent that has to pay, okay, you don't have to pay this year because your daughter or son has won a full grant and aid scholarship, that parent is going to be like, that's a windfall. That's making money.
Yeah.
That's not just a giveaway here. That is an effective giveaway. That's making money. That's income in my judgment. It's the same old deal. If you go back to your thing about paying the guys. Let them pay taxes on it too.
Oh
yeah, that'll change some minds.
State government, local Medicare. Let them pay all that stuff too.
Right.
If they want it, fine. Okay, 50% of what you get or 60% goes to your tuition and your books. And you still have to pay withholding and all the other taxes.
And never thought of that either. And I feel silly for never thinking of taxes.
Like I said, there's a landmine at every step.
Yep, absolutely. You got something else for him? Or?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I came from a MAC school. I graduated from CMU. So, and the MAC canceled all their sporting events. What was it, yesterday? How big of a statement is that for them to just, stamp, that's it, that's the end of the season, versus like the rest of the NCAA kind of dragging their feet a little bit on it? Or does it not even look like they're dragging their feet? I mean,
no, I think
MAC,
No, I think the MAC was very responsible, and to me, clearly it's about economics in the MAC. They don't have the same kind of economic business model as the big universities because they don't have as big a television contract. And let's be frank, there aren't many people show up to see those games.
That's true.
And their gate is not ultimately going to support. Hey, tuition at Central is not cheap.
Right.
Tuition at Eastern and all the rest of the places isn't cheap. And in order to pay full grant and aid scholarships, you got to have something coming in, right? And if your athletic program is kind of depending upon gate sales to get that done, in the Mid-American Conference over the last 15, 20 years, those games, because they're moving to Thursday nights and Friday nights, and there's a dwindling amount of income coming in there. So I thought they were extremely responsible in the Mid-American Conference to say, look, guys, let's not kid ourselves. We are called a mid-major, but the fact remains our budgets are absolutely, completely out of whack if we don't get the games with Notre Dame, Florida, Florida State, where we go down and get the $1 million or $1.5 million guarantee. So that adds a gigantic boost to our seasonal and year-long budget. If we don't have that and we have to depend upon just conference games, we got to seriously look at whether it's worth it right now to go broke or lose more than we can possibly stand to lose. And at that point, I think they all got together and said, you know what? It's better to cut our losses right now. Let's get out of it. That way we can plan and go forward knowing these are the numbers that we have to deal with and somehow make those work. And I think they were very responsible in doing what they did. To me, it's two things. One, for them, I think it's a lot about academics or student-athlete safety because again, their budget would be stretched beyond belief if they had to do all the testing and the things that we were talking about a few moments ago. And two, economically, they just can't afford it. And so for them, I thought it was a pretty responsible deal. And they were the first quote-unquote FBS conference to do it. And I think it has had an effect on the rest of those big conferences out there.
Now, Jim, how do you think this affects a guy like Nico Collins, who decided not to go out for the draft last year? He's going to come back for one more season. That was really celebrated by the fan base and stuff. Do you think that he's going to say, I don't even want to deal with spring football? I'm going out for this year's draft, assuming they have a draft, this winter? Or this spring,
that's a personal decision. But clearly this fall would have been his training camp. It would have been his proving ground for the draft. Now, if you are going to play in the spring, they're going to draft in the spring, probably after 2 or 3 games that you have played is when the NFL will draft, sometimes, in mid-April. I don't know when the schedule will be. So you want to play 5 or 6 games in the spring. Maybe you want to go to an NFL training camp and work out because you pretty much put your entire resume on tape a year ago. Yep. What you do this spring may not be the same resume that you had last fall against, prime competition and stuff like that. So if you're Nico and you are capable of playing in the National Football League at the next level, and you are, and you get the advice from agents, you get the advice from people who are in the know, who can tell you will be drafted here or there, then you make a decision, and it becomes a business decision at that point, whether you play in the spring or whether you just, like I said, go to those camps that are prep camps for college seniors that get ready for the draft and have all the scouts come by and look at you there. It's going to be changing. The quarterback at Clemson, Trevor Lawrence, is in the same boat.
Yeah.
He might not participate in his last season because it might not be in his best interest from a professional standpoint.
Well, and there's guys like Micah Parsons and Bateman out of Minnesota who have already, decided that that's what they're going to do. They're just going to opt out. I mean, obviously they have to now, but, not even go back in the spring. They're just going to go out for the draft. So.
And it's a decision. It's a personal decision. I can't fault them for it. It was brought on by something that was totally out of their control. But at this point, they've got to decide, okay, what's best for me?
Exactly.
And my future and my family's future.
Yeah.
And the opportunity, hey, as I've always said, colleges are in the business of getting you ready for your next career or to move on in society and get a job. And if it is their job or their dream and goal to become a professional athlete, then college has gotten them prepared to let them give that a shot.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. Totally agree.
It's the old story. I would love to have them get a degree, but at this point, with all that's been, all the water under the bridge, they got to make that decision on their own, and they think what's in their best interest.
Yeah,
right. Agreed. Yeah.
Jim, I am just kind of from a fan's point of view, and changing subjects away from this. I know we had a lot of, like Andy said, we had a ton of questions that had nothing to do with the cancellation of the season. But But I wanted to ask you kind of some filler questions. Like, you spent a lot of time with Bo Schembechler. Do you have any like really cool Bo Schembechler stories or anything like that?
I got a million of them. I mean,
I know you do.
All of us sit around, that played for him, and we tell Bo stories. It's like, what did he say to you? He said, well, he told me once I was the worst tackle in the history of intercollegiate football.
Right.
he told me once during a film session that we were watching film in the basement underneath the old Ray Fisher baseball stadium, and he was going back and forth, and I was playing, and I whiffed on him. I mean, totally whiffed somebody. And so he kept playing it back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. And I'm just cowering, getting smaller and smaller in my chair. And he stopped, and the whole team's there. And he goes, hey, everybody, take a look at our strong tackle. Now, isn't that amazing? And everybody starts to chuckle, right? And they know what's going on. And he kind of looks over at me and he says, and we gave you a scholarship.
Right.
Now I'm just dying there. But he had his way, and even though he was hard on you like that, he, I loved him. And again, he made me as good as I possibly could be at that point in my life. I did not think I could go where I needed to go, and he took me there. Whether I was kicking and screaming, he got me there. And I played on 2 teams, won 2 Big Ten championships, and participated in 2 Rose Bowls, and in 3 years of my college career only lost 5 games. If you had told me that when I was a high school senior, I'd have said, I'll take it and be happy the rest of my life. And I'm happy. Bo was the best in the world.
And out of all those accomplishments, how many times did you beat Ohio State, though?
2 out of 3 years.
That's pretty darn good. That's still
we beat him my sophomore year in the gigantic 1969 upset, 24-12, and then my senior year we beat him 10-7 in Ann Arbor. So
sure.
Both times we went to the Rose Bowl as Big Ten champions.
Yeah.
So as Bo said to us in our first spring, when everybody was quitting because he was so hard on us, he was beating us out. Physically and mentally, that was as tough a time in my life. And I mean, you had to gird yourself to go out to practice. I mean, it was just like, oh man, 2 more hours, can I make it? It's almost like being addicted, You had to make it, just take the next step. Just get through the next day, get through the next hour. I think the SEALs have that training,
Yeah.
Just get to the next hour. And it was kind of like that for all of us. And he put up that sign, those who stay will be champions, when about 30% of the team was quitting. And that next year when we beat Ohio State 24-12 and won the championship, we all said, holy crap, we're champions. The old man was right. There's a method to his madness.
Did it ever cross your mind to walk away during those practices?
No.
No?
No, they were going to have to, it was hard. But, and he told us many times afterwards, he may have been a little too tough, he said, but I had to test each and every one of you. I had to find out who would stay when it really got hard. Yeah. And he said, maybe I was a little too hard. But those guys that stayed ultimately became some of his best friends. That's the weird part about it. I mean, he beat those guys at 69. I put great emphasis on the seniors on that class. They were recruited by Bump Elliott and played 3 years under Bump Elliott. And that senior year when Schembechler came in, those guys had to be the leaders. They had to go through a complete and utter culture shock change. And if they didn't do it, that team might have fractured. But those seniors on the team, the Garvey Craws and the Don Moorheads and the Cecil Pryors, the Jim Bettses, those guys stayed together and weathered that storm. And us underclassmen looked at them and said, if that's what it takes, I guess if they're okay, we got to stay with it. And our sophomore and junior class learned a lot from them. Even when we had about a 30% rate in regards to defections, those who stayed wound up being champions, as the old man said.
Yeah. Now, Andy's a huge Michigan fan, so he probably has a bunch more questions. I've got at least 2 solid questions for you. At least 2 more solid questions for you. So
they're all solid.
Yeah. Well, thank you. As long as your time will allow, we appreciate it.
They're all solid.
Now, Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh just had this kind of altercation in the public eye about, Harbaugh called him out, and Ryan Day came back and said, well, we're going to hang 100 on you. I'm waiting for, like, some big Harbaugh, like, statement, something that will create a new slogan. I mean, if he had said something like that to Bo Schembechler, Bo never would have let it go. I mean, those who stay will be champions. He would have come up with something 100 times bigger and better than that. Like,
well, at some point, it's like pick your spots.
Sure.
And at some point, Jim will probably come up with something in response to that. But right away, I think he wanted to diffuse the situation. And the other reason is people. The thing that I found interesting is that Ryan Day didn't deny the fact that he was cheating.
Yeah, he didn't even mention it once.
He didn't even mention the fact that his coaches are out there doing something wrong. He just said, well, hang 100 on Harbaugh, they said. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And
right.
2, how often have we gone through these whole things where, you talk about coaches that are cheating and recruiting and doing all this other stuff, and it's never going to get fixed until they get reported and da-da-da-da-da. We all go through this whole thing. Well, Jim had a picture that was published in a newspaper down in Columbus, and it was legit, and it was against the rules in regards to what the NCAA said in regards to preparation. So he just pointed it out, and it happened to be Ohio State, and it happened to create this mess. But if more guys did that, maybe you'd have a little bit, quote-unquote, leveler playing field across the board.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think Jim will bide his time in regards to, the comeback. His best comeback would be kicking Ohio State's butt somewhere.
Absolutely.
And this year, if they play next spring, anytime next spring, if they play, kicking his butt would be hanging 100 on them right away. I mean, that'd be plenty in regards to a statement back at Ryan Day. And if it happens, believe me, I think you'll see Harbaugh say something.
Yeah, let your play do the talking,
Amen.
So do you think anything will come of that? I mean, will the NCAA even look into this? It seems kind of minor, I guess, in the grand scheme of what goes on.
I doubt it. I mean, the thing that's sad, to me anyway, remember a few years back, Michigan, when Dave Brandon was the athletic director, Michigan got that, Rich Rodriguez was around, and there was what was it? There was something, they overstepped their bounds in the number of hours they quote unquote were practicing.
Yeah, I remember that, and that was a
big deal. It was like some 2 hours or something during 1 week when they went to meetings, and it wasn't considered practice. Nobody knew what the exact rule was about whether it was a practice or whether it was countable hours toward that 20 hours a week. Well, Michigan then gets, that was nothing. I mean, that was a minor, tiny little, it had nothing to do with a competitive advantage, if you will. And yet they got nailed. So when you say it's a little one, it's funny. It is. It was a minor transgression. But one guy's minor transgression should be the same guy's minor transgression at the other school, get the same kind of attention.
I 100% agree. I mean, it's a double standard if it's not, but I won't even go there.
Yeah, well, no, but that's a good way to put it. There's double standards a lot out there.
Yeah.
Now, Brandy, like I said, I'm kind of obsessed with Bo. I just loved his kind of hard-nosed, style and coaching and all that. I'm in love with it. Anyways, I recall a story you told kind of on YouTube. I saw just a quick video when I was doing my homework of you, where you told that similar story, where like you messed up, but you didn't really mess up. It was all of like a half a step, something going on, and like he chewed you out.
Oh, was it the punt? Was it?
Yeah,
was it
yeah.
Punt?
And it was like during a practice, and he said he was he was going to pull your scholarship and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
And you're 19 years old, and here you are, and you're like walking out the tunnel thinking, how am I going to tell my parents that
That's exactly right.
You know, that I lost my scholarship to Michigan and all this. Now
we played Missouri in 1969. We got beat, and in the game we got a punt block. Well, that doesn't happen on a Bo Schembechler coach team. So the next Tuesday we're in practice. Deerdorf, who was ahead of me in the lineup, NFL Hall of Famer, I backed him up.
Yeah.
Great luck on my part.
Right.
So anyway, I'm starting. And back then, you couldn't substitute a punt cover team. You substitute two guys, a snapper and a punter. That was the only substitute you could do. So I'm on the punt team covering the punt. And during practice, we're in the stadium. And Bo said, all right, to the scout team who was blocking the punt. He said, I want you to go full speed, and I want our guys to block you. And if anybody over there blocks the punt, I'll give you a milkshake. So, of course, they were all motivated up, right? So we go through, get the snap. I jab out. I get my man. I know I got him. Because two guys tried to go through my outside gap. And I jabbed out, got through the inside guy, and got a piece of the outside guy. No way he gets to the ball. Then I release and head downfield. Well, I look up to locate the ball. There's no ball. Then I hear this yelling from behind me in the stadium echoing, you son of a bitch.
Right.
And I went, oh, man, somebody's in trouble. So I peel around to go back to the line of scrimmage, and he is running at a gallop, and he's coming right at me. Well, I turn around and look behind me because it ain't me. I know I did my job, and there's nobody back there. And so I turn around and look back, and I'm kind of going, and about that time, he left his seat. And he caught me right up underneath the chin strap, underneath my cage. And he said, get off the field. You're the worst tackle I've ever seen. I can't even believe you're on my football field. I don't know why we gave you a uniform. Get out of here. And I'm 19 years old, and I am hyperventilating. And I'm walking up the tunnel, literally crying, saying, how am I going to tell my parents that I lost my scholarship? Jerry Hanlon, the offensive line coach, comes running up the tunnel after me and says, come on back down. Don't worry. We got to finish practice. We're short on tackles. And I said, he just kicked me out. He says, don't worry. It wasn't your fault. And I said, well, tell him that. So 3 days later at training table, I'm standing in line, and I get this elbow on my back. I turn and look at his bow, and he goes, you don't think it was your fault, do you? And I said, it wasn't my fault. I jabbed out and got the guy I was supposed to get, and you know it. He says, well, that may be true, but your split was a little too wide. So to me, that was an apology.
Right.
But that was one of those moments, again, that you had to survive. I mean, you had to have a thick skin to play for him. The joy of winning and the joy of having him as a friend, and then you also knew that you were getting better. You're sitting there saying to yourself, I'm playing on a team that's ranked 3rd or 4th in the country. You got to be kidding me. And I'm an integral part of it. That will get your attention, and you kind of look to see, how did this happen? And you look to your position coach, and you look to your head coach and said, they've dragged me here. And that gives you a great sense of pride, and it also gives you a great sense of appreciation for what they've done.
That's awesome. Now, like, years later, you had many dealings with him and talking to him on it was the Michigan Replay show when you were talking with him. Now it's named something different, but did he ever, like, apologize to you, or later on, he's like, he's a good kid, or no, did let up?
Oh, he would always say that to me, you're a good kid, Brandstatter, you're a good guy. but for that specifics, he used to be funny, because he would say things like, we would tell a story on him, or something like that he did. Like I told a story about, I said, when he looked up from the films and he said, did we actually give you a scholarship? He starts laughing and goes, I never said that. And I looked at him and I said, hey, coach, when you're 19 years old and your head coach turns and looks at you, that's something that remains with you indelibly etched in your brain. Yeah. So You may have forgotten it, but my 18-year-old brain didn't forget it.
Right. You'd never would. You'd never forget
Never,
that.
ever would.
No. Close you got it.
Well, so also I want to bring up the Free Press obviously put out an article. I'm sure you've read it, Jim, where they the whole Dr. Anderson thing that's been going on. They pretty much, I would almost call it. Me personally, I call it a hit piece on Bo because he's not here to defend himself.
To me, that's an accurate description.
I guess if you've read it, I guess I kind of just want to know your thoughts on it because I read it and Bo's not here to defend himself. Neither is Canham. This person's a John Doe. And the issue is with the Dr. Anderson. It's not with Bo, but you put him on the headline of the article saying that his legacy is in jeopardy is the title of the article. I just feel that that's it's almost like you're trying to somehow pin something on him that's not there.
Right.
I agree. I couldn't agree more, and your take on it is exactly my take. A couple of things. There are over 300 guys that are supposedly on this class action type suit against the University of Michigan in regards to Dr. Anderson's activities and his alleged treatment of them. There's only one that has mentioned Schembechler as being culpable, and that's this guy. There have been over 3,000 questionnaires and 3,000 or more people been questioned about Dr. Anderson and his problems. And I will tell you this, that I was treated by Dr. Anderson on, I think, 8 different occasions. I'm pretty sure that we got a physical prior to spring football and prior to fall ball every year. So that'd be 2 a year. And at no time in any one of those physicals that I got to be cleared to play Big Ten football by the medical staff was I ever in any way abused. I always felt that he treated me professionally, and it was nothing more than a standard physical that I got from my family doctor at home when I was in high school, when he delivered that piece of paper to my high school coach that I was physically okay to play, and they offered me the equipment to play. So I never had a problem with Dr. Anderson. That's me personally. I don't know about these other guys, and I don't know about all of them. But I will say exactly what you said. One guy, 40 years, almost 40 years, decides to come out and say, Bo knew out of all the rest of them, and Bo's not here to defend himself. I knew Bo Schembechler for 45, 50 years. And Bo Schembechler would have never let anything like that stand. I will, to my dying day, believe that. Any kind of activity that Dr. Anderson was involved in, according to this, these reports, if Bo knew of something like that or was told of something like that, he would have taken care of it. I know that to be a fact. So for an article to come up and paint Bo as the bad guy in this deal, to me, is absolutely off base and wrong. And again, it's all about being alleged. It isn't true. It's one man's word against another, and that man's word is 40 years old, and the other guy isn't here to defend himself, and that's Bo Schembechler. Yeah, so I just think that the credibility of the witness is somewhat in question, and I ask to myself, why the motivation? What's the motivation all of a sudden? And there's a lawsuit, and the lawsuit asks for damages. And what are those damages? Money.
Yep.
And the only way they're going to get money is if they find some link between the administration, quote unquote, and Anderson. Because you can't sue Anderson because his estate, he's been dead 12 years. So I just think I'm with you on that. I will defend Bo completely. If he knew something was off base and wrong, he would have nipped it in the bud. He wouldn't have let it stand. And to be trashed like he was in the newspaper, you make assumptions about this guy's story, and you don't do anything to vet that guy and to find out what the accuser is all about, and yet you just decide, okay, we're gonna drill Schembechler based on this guy's word 40 years later, and we don't even know this is a John Doe. I'm sorry, that rings to be unfair in my point of view, and it's about attorneys trying to make money.
Yeah, I mean, even in the article itself, they said several times that they combed through all the documents during Schembechler's tenure and stuff, and they couldn't find any mention of him knowing anything. So if you can't find that, why the hell are you putting his name on the title of an article that you're putting out on?
The only thing I can think of is the newspapers are dying to some degree. Newsprint, and they need something to sell papers, and they know that to sell papers, you use Schembechler's name in a headline like that, you're going to sell a few papers. I thought it was unfair too. If you saw this, I think it was the same newspaper or maybe the News. 25 years after the Gary Moeller incident, came up and did a full expose on Gary Moeller's the night that he had with and basically relived that whole incident. What? There was no reason to do that. Well, yet they did it, and they trashed Mo again, and that was to me unfair also.
Well, you know why that is, Jim? That's because Michigan sells, so they write articles on Michigan, and they know they're gonna get their readers.
They needed to sell some newspaper advertising, I think, and that will do it. It's just that at what price, and the reputation of a great man, you try to sell newspapers, and to me, what's dying here is journalistic integrity. I thought in the day you used to be able to write stuff, but you would tell both sides of the story. And just the comment that if the writer would have said, through all of the documents that they have gone through this process, not one other lawsuit has alleged Schembechler's involvement in any way, shape, or form. If they'd have just included that line, that would have been fair, because you're telling both sides of the story now. But they didn't include that line. And that's where I think the whole idea of fairness has been lost in many of the journalists that are out there right now. Quote unquote journalists.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. You got anything else for me, Andy?
Nope. I think that wraps it up for me. So,
hey, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Brandstatter.
We're glad to do it. You guys, it was fun talking with you. I especially like the Kaline poster behind you.
Yeah, I noticed. All right, cool.
I appreciate
that. He was one of my heroes when I was growing up.
You ever get to meet him?
I got to know Al. We were working together a little bit during baseball when I was working at Channel 4 in Detroit. Channel 4 had the Tigers contract. I got to know Al pretty well. He's a classy guy, first of all. And always very soft-spoken, always very honest. His integrity was beyond control. He was just a great guy. But when I was a freshman at Michigan in 1968, we were on the practice field at Ferry Field with my teammates, Reggie McKenzie and Glenn Dowdy and all those guys that I played with and came to school with when the Tigers won the '68 World Championship in St. Louis. And we all stopped practice. And we were, way to go, because all of us were Detroit Tiger fans. And we were probably as happy for Al Kaline that day, all of us. And when I got to meet him, I was starstruck. I told him, I said, Al, Mr. Kaline, you are the man. You are. I used to watch you when I was in high school. I'd go down to get tickets at Kaline's Corner. One last story. So I'm a kid.
Absolutely.
You guys weren't even born yet, okay? I don't even know the name of whether you remember the name Tony Oliva. He played for the Minnesota Twins. Great left-handed batter. Always hit for great average, right? But at the end of his career, his legs were kind of gone. But he still can hit ropes. So we always, when we went to games, my high school buddies and I, we'd drive down, get tickets in the right field corner because we wanted Kaline's Corner. So we get tickets out there. And so Oliva hits this screamer right over Norm Cash at first base, bounces 2 bounces, hits the side wall, hits the back wall, and Kaline is playing right field. He never went to where the ball was. He went to a spot in right field, and it bounced once, twice, came back and it hit him where he was standing about 12 feet in and 3 feet back from the wall. He had played the caroms perfectly. Hit him about waist-high glove side. He turned and threw the ball to second base. Oliva was trying to get to second for a double. Oliva was about 20 feet from the bag. I mean, he wasn't even halfway there. And there's Dick McCall at the second baseman standing there with the ball going. And Oliva stopped in the base path, turned and looked to right field, and he took his hat and doffed his cap, and he ran back to the dugout. They didn't even tag him. I mean, and all of the throws, the hitting and everything that Kaline did, I'll never forget that moment. As long as I live, he threw a rocket to McAuliffe standing on second base. Oliva literally he wasn't even halfway there. And he's looking up, chugging, and he sees McAuliffe already with the ball, and he's going, he looks to right field, and he goes, runs back to the dugout. It was amazing. Anyway, that's my favorite.
That's all he could do.
I love your poster back there, guys, and I had a great time with you.
Thank you so much. Right. We'd love to have you on again in the future, sir. So thanks again.
Appreciate it. Man.
Yeah, you gave us a lot more time than we promised we'd keep you for, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
No worries. Stay safe. Be well. Okay.
You as well, sir.
You too.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Small Market Podcast. Like and comment, interact with us on Facebook at the Small Market Podcast, subscribe to the podcast on Anchor and Spotify, or email us at smallmarketpodcast@gmail.com. Music for Small Market Podcast was provided by the band Pure.